My uncle filmed himself hurting my son. My wife helped him. They thought I'd never find out. I was still in uniform, boots caked in the red dirt of a place I couldn't even pronounce properly, when the video hit my inbox. No subject, no warning, just a notification ping while I sat in the concrete shack we used as a break room between rotations. My hands were still shaking from the last session. I almost didn't open it. God, I wish I hadn't. The thumbnail was blurry, but I knew that room. It was our living room back home. I saw Wesley, my son, sitting on the carpet with his little Captain America shirt, the one I sent him from base last Christmas. Then I hit play. The first sound I heard was my wife laughing. Not soft or awkward, but full-bellied, hysterical. Then the camera jerked to the side, revealing my uncle, Herman Reed. I hadn't seen him in over a year, not since he borrowed my truck and left it in a ditch with a busted axle. I kept my mouth shut back then. Family, right? He was standing over Wesley with his belt already halfway unlooked. I remember blinking, thinking, no, that's not what I'm seeing. That can't be what I'm seeing. But then Wesley flinched before the first strike even landed. Herman barked something I couldn't make out, then snapped the belt across Wesley's legs. My kid screamed, shrill, raw, that sound kids only make when they've stopped hoping someone's going to help them. And behind the camera, my wife kept laughing. I recognized the sound of her bracelet jingling as she moved. The gold one I bought her after my second tour. She said I never noticed the little things. Guess I noticed it now. Jake's just a mechanic who washes army tires, she said off camera, like that was some kind of joke. Then she giggled again, and it cut deeper than any ID I'd ever seen blow up a convoy. I felt my whole world tilt. My breathing got weird, shallow, fast, like I'd been sprinting, but I was still sitting, still watching, still hearing my boy scream. Nobody spoke in the room after that. Even the other guys, tough as nails, the kind who joked about landmines, just stared at me. One of them reached to pause the video, but I stopped him. If I had to see it, they had to see it. They needed to understand why I wasn't going to be here anymore. Why I couldn't. I didn't say anything. Just stood up, walked to the wall-mounted terminal, and opened the request form. Emergency leave. I typed it like a machine, each keystroke deliberate. I didn't breathe again until I hit submit. No fanfare. No speech. No threats. But every cell in my body was screaming. I could feel my skin vibrating with a quiet, nuclear kind of rage. A shaking, cold emptiness wrapped around my spine and started digging into me, bone by bone. I didn't have a plan, didn't know what I'd do once my boots hit U.S. soil. But something in me was already gone, like someone had reached into my chest and carved out the man I used to be. All that was left was a hollow echo of a father, one who'd just watched his world burn from thousands of miles away. And now, I was coming home. I landed stateside under a fake return date, didn't tell a soul, not command, not my parents, not even the guy who'd driven me to the airstrip. I needed silence. Distance. I didn't want a welcome party or anyone asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. What I needed was clarity, and I knew I wasn't going to get it by walking through the front door and pretending any of this could still be salvaged. The man who stepped off that plane wasn't Jake Walker the soldier anymore. That version of me had been quietly erased the second I hit play on that goddamn video. I didn't go home. Not right away. I got a burner phone, checked into a shitty motel off Route 7. One of those places where the ice machine is broken and everything smells like stale cigarette smoke no matter how new the sheets are. I needed to be near them without being seen. I needed to watch. To know what the hell had happened while I was overseas bleeding for a family that didn't even see me as more than a paycheck and a punchline. First thing I did was find Herman. It wasn't hard. Guy wasn't exactly subtle, never was. Still drove the same rust-colored Dodge Charger he'd stolen off a tweaker 2 years back and somehow never registered. I followed him from a gas station on Martin to this roach pit of a neighborhood in South Glen, the kind of place where broken porch lights flicker all night and every window's either boarded up or covered with sheets. His place was on the second floor of a duplex that looked like it should have been condemned 10 years ago. Mold blooming up the siding, satellite dish pointed at nothing. 3 pit bulls chained to the fence out front, all ribs and rage. I parked 2 streets over and watched. First hour, nothing. Then people started showing up. Not friends, clients. Twitchy, paranoid types. Skinny jeans, hoodies too big for their frame, eyes darting like pigeons on Adderall. Every one of them came in looking like they hadn't slept in days, and none of them stayed longer than 10 minutes. You know what that means. It didn't take a genius to figure out Herman had his own little pharmaceutical empire running out of that filthy apartment. Pills, probably. Maybe meth. I'd seen enough of that kind of traffic back in the alleys of Kandahar to know the signs. Around 2 a.m., he finally left. I tailed him with lights off, low and slow, until he parked at some 24-hour laundromat with security cameras that didn't even point in the right direction. He disappeared inside with a girl who couldn't have been more than 19. She looked nervous, clutched her purse like it was her lifeline, and didn't even bother to make eye contact with him. My stomach turned. I didn't follow them in. That's when I knew I had to go deeper. The next morning, I broke into his place. Didn't need to kick the door down or anything. People like Herman never really bother with locks, especially when they're too paranoid about cops to install working ones. Slipped in through the kitchen window, boots barely making a sound on the cracked linoleum. The whole place reeked of stale beer, weed resin, and cat piss. There were fast food wrappers everywhere, a pile of roaches nesting in a Mountain Dew bottle on the counter, and God help me, something thick and brown leaking from beneath the fridge that I didn't dare investigate. I found his phone on the armrest of a busted-up recliner next to an overflowing ashtray. No password. Just swipe up and I was in. I don't know if he was too strung out to care or just arrogant enough to think no one would ever dare come for him. Either way, it worked in my favor. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and started digging. First thing I found were texts. Long threads, back and forth with numbers saved under code names, Doc, Uncle Z, Crimson. Most of them were transactional. Got 10 blues. Need more candy. I screenshotted everything, every message, every name, every timestamp. But then I found the folder. It was buried under 3 layers of junk apps, tucked behind an icon labeled Work Tools. I opened it, and the breath went out of me like I'd been kicked in the chest. Dozens of videos, all titled with dates. Some had initials. Some were just labeled W. The first one I opened, God help me. I should have stopped after the first few seconds. But I watched. I had to. My son. My baby boy. Wesley. Terrified. Hurt. Crying and trying to hide under a table while Herman egged him on, slapping him, taunting him, filming it like it was some twisted trophy hunt. Some of the videos weren't even filmed at Herman's place. They were in my home. In Wesley's bedroom. The dinosaur comforter, the nightlight shaped like a moon. And in the background, sometimes faint, sometimes unmistakable, I could hear Marissa, laughing, encouraging him. In one, she said, "Don't cry, he's just teaching you to be tough like Daddy." My stomach turned so hard I almost threw up right there in that rancid living room. There was more. So much more. Emails. Group chats on encrypted apps. Photos that made me want to rip my own eyes out. I found messages between Herman and other men, talking about sessions, renting time, exclusive clips. It wasn't just him. He was part of something bigger. A network. A goddamn ring. And somehow, my son had ended up at the center of it. I didn't even notice the tears on my face until they hit the cracked screen of that phone. At the bottom of one thread, I saw a familiar name. Marissa. Her messages were spaced out, like someone being coaxed into something. It started subtle. "He's so difficult lately. Jake's gone again. I can't do this alone." And then, "You were right about him. He doesn't appreciate me. You treat me better than he ever has." It went on like that for months. Manipulation, gaslighting, flattery. Herman reeling her in one text at a time, feeding her insecurities, painting me like some absentee loser while poisoning her mind with whatever garbage would keep her under his thumb. By the time I rotated out, she was already knee-deep in it. And I never saw it coming. I was halfway around the world, breaking down bombs and interrogating warlords, while my own goddamn family was being hollowed out from the inside. I copied everything. Dumped the entire phone's contents onto my own drive. Every file, every chat, every 6 second of footage. Then I wiped it clean and put it back exactly where I found it. Didn't take a souvenir. Didn't leave a trace. I walked out of that apartment, the weight of it all pressing down on me like body armor that no longer fit. That night, back in the motel, I sat on the bed with my boots still on, staring at the wall. My mind was racing, but my body had gone still, locked down, like I'd been sniped from the inside. Everything I knew about my life was gone. The home I'd built. The marriage I thought was flawed, but stable. The safety I believed I'd bought for my son with every drop of sweat I left on that desert floor. All of it lies. A game I never knew I was losing until the last card fell. And now I wasn't just a father. I was a man with nothing left to lose. The hour just before dawn is the quietest hell on earth. Even the worst neighborhoods settle down around 3 a.m., like every degenerate, addict, and dealer finally runs out of gas at the same time. I stood across the street from Herman's building, watching the window where his light had gone out an hour earlier. No movement since. His charger hadn't moved either. The pit bulls were out back in their rusted pen, barking once in a while, but they were too half-starved to do anything about a shadow slipping past their blind side. I didn't wear gloves. I wanted to feel every surface I touched. I wanted to press my fingers into his world and leave behind nothing but silence and fear. The kitchen window still didn't latch properly. A little push, a practice slide, and I was in. The stink hit me again. Old weed, sweat, fast food, and the unmistakable staleness of a man who never grew out of the rot inside him. The apartment was dead still. Just the quiet hum of the fridge, a light flicker from the bathroom nightlight someone had duct taped to the wall, and the slow, nasal wheezing of a man who had no idea he was about to find out what kind of mechanic I really was. I moved like I was back in Fallujah, one room at a time, sweeping not for threats, but for confirmation. I wasn't looking for surprises. I was here to catalog sin. I found the laptop under a pile of porn DVDs and crushed beer cans. Password protected. No problem. He'd used the same passcode as his phone, his own birth year. Pathetic. Within minutes, I was deep in his files again. Backups of videos. Names. IP logs. Transfers. Some of it encrypted, but not nearly well enough. This wasn't some criminal mastermind. I wasn't in the lair of a genius. Just a coward with access and no oversight. I copied everything. Dumped files onto a fresh drive, labeled every folder. I wasn't there to erase. I was there to archive. The closet was worse. Boxes of DVDs with masking tape labels. W1, W2, SPL. Some handwritten, some stamped. Beneath the box was a camera bag, professional rig, tripod legs still caked with dirt like he'd set it up outdoors more than once. I didn't open it. Just photographed everything where it was, each image time-stamped, location tagged. I wanted a record. I wanted a trail so long no lawyer in the country could call it circumstantial. I checked my watch. 3:52. Time. I took the last chair from his cluttered dining table, dragged it across the stained carpet into the bedroom, and set it 2 feet from his mattress. He was sprawled across it in a grease-streaked undershirt, one sock halfway off, mouth open like a dead man dreaming. I sat in the chair and waited. 10 full minutes. I wanted the stillness to wrap around the room like a noose. Then I said it. Hello, Herman. We need to talk. His eyes fluttered first, confused. Then the blinking started, the sluggish kind like his brain couldn't quite boot up fast enough to match the change in temperature around him. I didn't move, just sat there. Let him realize. His eyes focused, landed on my face. And for a second, I saw that animal flicker of instinct. He knew me, but he didn't know this version. His mouth parted like he wanted to crack some joke, but nothing came out. That's when it clicked. The look in his eyes shifted. His body didn't move, but something inside him screamed. He expected the grease monkey with dirt under his nails. The dumbass who turned wrenches and got thanked with cheap beers and shoulder claps. He expected the family punchline. Instead, he got what the army built out of my bones, a specialist trained to dismantle mines without firing a shot. He tried to sit up. I didn't move. What the F, he started. You don't talk yet, I said calmly. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm, controlled. Like I was back in that cold steel room halfway across the world, staring down a man who thought he held the leverage. My voice alone pressed him flat to the mattress. He froze, blinked again. His mouth twitched, like he was trying to figure out if he was still dreaming or already dead. I leaned forward just an inch, elbows on my knees, voice low. I've seen everything, Herman. Every file, every video, every message. I know who you've sold to. I know who you talked to. I know what you've done. And I know what you made her do. He opened his mouth again, but this time his lips just moved uselessly, like words would break him faster than silence. Don't lie, I said, and the words cut sharper than any weapon in the room. I've already got the truth. You're not here to explain. You're here to listen. He nodded, just once, shallow and slow. His breathing had changed, quicker, shallower, like prey trying not to be seen, even while staring straight into the eyes of the thing that came to feed. I sat back, not relaxed, measured. The kind of calm that makes men beg for yelling because the quiet means they don't know where the pain is going to land next. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need threats. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for full psychological dismantling. And he was going to break himself with nothing but the weight of what he'd done and the look in my eyes while I reminded him what kind of man he'd thought he'd never have to face. Me, Jake Walker. Not a mechanic. Not a fool. Not the father you mock while you trade files in the dark. But the one thing you never prepared for, consequence. He sat on the edge of the mattress, hands limp in his lap, mouth slightly open like his body hadn't figured out whether to tremble or bolt. I didn't rush him. I didn't move. I just sat there with the flash drive between my fingers and the recorder quietly rolling in my jacket pocket, timestamp blinking like a heartbeat. I looked him in the eye and said, You're going to tell me everything. No threats. No punches. Just your words, Herman. Yours and the truth. At first, he tried to shift into defense, half a smirk forming, some pathetic attempt at bravado, like he was still in control of anything. Look, I don't know what you think you saw. I cut him off before the sentence even finished leaving his mouth. I know what I saw. I've got your videos. The messages. The IP logs. The transfers. I know what you've been doing in that room. I know which sites you used, what you posted, who you talked to. I know what's in the closet. I know what you did to my son. His face dropped like gravity had turned on just for him. The smirk slid off. His shoulders sagged, spine softening like I'd taken the air out of his lungs. I leaned forward, not menacing, not violent, just surgical. And I know Marissa knew. That hit different. He blinked, eyes darting to the corner of the room like he thought someone else might speak up for him. I let the silence expand until it felt heavy in the walls, in the floorboards, in the spaces between the seconds ticking away. Then I asked calmly, how long? He stared at his knees. When he finally spoke, his voice came out hoarse, small. Few months after you left. Second rotation. She was lonely, man. She was mad at you. Said you were gone too long. Said the boy was acting up. Said she didn't know how to control him. I didn't move. She'd call me to help, at first. Like babysitting, or whatever. Said it'd only be for a couple hours. Then she started staying out longer. Drinking. Hanging with friends. I started keeping the kid overnight sometimes. I asked again, how long were you hurting him? He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Over a year. I nodded once. He kept talking. He wanted to. Like the guilt was some weight he could finally set down now that someone was forcing him to carry it in daylight. I didn't mean for it to get like that. It just, the boy's stubborn. He doesn't listen. And Marissa, she said he needed it. Said boys need discipline. Said you were never strict with him, that he needed to feel a man's hand. He was unraveling himself one thread at a time, and I just kept watching. Listening. Burning it all into memory. Every word. Every justification. Every excuse smeared in rot and self-pity. She said it wasn't a big deal, he whispered. Said, you're just showing him boundaries. She said, Jake would understand. She laughed, said you'd thank us someday. I hit record on the external mic on the table. Then I took out the notepad and pen I'd laid beside it. Write it down, I said. Everything. He hesitated like he thought maybe that part wasn't necessary. Like the spoken words weren't already permanent. I said it again, quieter. Write it all down. Every detail. I want it in your hand. I want your name at the bottom. And he did. He wrote slow at first. Then faster, like once it started, he couldn't stop it from spilling out. For pages. Both sides. Names. Dates. What he did. What she allowed. Where the cameras were. Who he sent the videos to. And most damning of all, how he justified it. The boy needed discipline. He signed it. Full name. Date. Initials on every page. I took the pen back, folded the papers slowly, and slipped them into my inner jacket pocket. Then I stood up, chair legs scraping against the floor like a knife being drawn from a sheath. He looked up at me like he didn't know what was going to come next. I stared at him in the darkness for a moment longer, letting the weight of it all press into the room like fog after a fire. This, I said, is just the beginning. Then I walked out, leaving the door open behind me. Let the cold air follow me down the hall. Let the silence finish what I started. The sun hadn't been up for long. Pale light filtered through the blinds like it was afraid to fully enter the house. I parked 2 blocks down and walked the last stretch. No footsteps. No noise. Just the gravel under my boots and the rhythmic thud of my own heart refusing to slow down. I used my own key. It still worked. The lock turned like nothing had changed, like the whole house hadn't already rotted behind its clean suburban shell. Inside, it smelled like lavender and betrayal. Everything looked staged. A candle burning in the hallway, soft music still playing low from a speaker in the kitchen, breakfast dishes in the sink, as if someone had just finished pretending they lived a normal life. It was all fake. Every square inch. Every framed photo on the wall. Every smile in those glass-covered moments. I walked through it like a ghost, like I didn't belong in my own space anymore. Then I heard her upstairs. Marissa. She was humming. Humming. I stood in the foyer for a full 30 seconds before I spoke. Loud enough to carry. Quiet enough to unsettle. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Silence. Then footsteps. Fast. Her coming down the stairs in that rushed, happy rhythm I used to mistake for love. She hit the last step and froze when she saw me. Barefoot, robe half-tied. Face pale like she'd seen a ghost she never thought would come home this way. Her mouth opened, and for a second, I could see the script loading in her head. The one where she throws her arms around me, plays the shocked but devoted wife, starts crying about how much she missed me and how hard it's been. Jake? She whispered, voice trembling, eyes already wet. Oh my God. Jake, you're home. She rushed forward. I didn't let her touch me. One step back. One hand raised. Her hands froze midair. She blinked, confused. Then scared. I reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, tapped the screen once, and held it up. No words. Just the video. The one where she's standing behind the camera, laughing while our son begs to be left alone. The one where she mocks me while Herman uses his belt like a weapon. The one where her voice floats through the room like poison. He's just a mechanic. Just a guy who washes tires. She covered her mouth before the audio even reached the worst part. Her knees buckled, and she dropped to the floor like someone pulled her spine out. Sobbing. Loud. Broken. But it wasn't grief. Not really. It was exposure. It was shame without dignity. Still, I didn't move. I didn't shout. I didn't pace or slam a fist into the wall like some husband from a bad drama. I just stood there. Still. Focused. Like I was back in that interrogation room halfway across the world, watching someone's whole lie collapse under the weight of its own cowardice. She reached for me again from the floor, fingers trembling. I didn't know. I didn't mean. Jake, please. I crouched just enough to meet her eyes. You thought I was weak, I said, voice even. Controlled. Every word placed like a scalpel. You thought I was a dumb soldier who'd never see through your lies. A guy who'd never question why his son cried every time he left. You thought distance made me blind. You thought silence made me soft. You thought if you laughed loud enough, I'd never hear the truth underneath it. She tried to speak, but her breath caught on the way out. You were wrong. I stood, stepped over her, and walked toward the back of the house. Let her cry. Let her sit in it. Let her feel the silence the same way I felt it thousands of miles from home, when my son's voice cracked through the screen and I wasn't there to stop it. Let her taste what consequence feels like when it doesn't raise its voice, but still makes your whole world fall apart. He showed up 8 minutes after I made the call. No threats. No explanation. Just a single sentence. Come to the house. Now. I left the front door cracked. He didn't knock. Didn't call out. He stepped inside like a man walking into his own funeral, eyes wide, body pulled tight, like someone had cinched every nerve in his spine. His sweat hit the air before he did. I could smell the fear. Sharp. Acidic. Familiar. Marissa was already on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, face streaked with whatever was left of her mascara and whatever hadn't already been washed out by shame. She hadn't spoken in over an hour. Just sat there in the same robe, hollow-eyed, clutching herself like she was trying to rewind the last 5 years through sheer will. It didn't matter. I pointed to the armchair across from her. Herman sat without a word. I stood between them, arms crossed, the phone and drive on the coffee table in front of me like loaded weapons. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. Here's what's going to happen, I said, voice level, each word carved out like I'd been practicing them in my sleep. We're going to make another video. Not for the internet. Not for you and your sick little circle, Herman. This one's for the authorities. The real ones. His lips twitched. Marissa shifted. I didn't wait for objections. You're going to confess again. On camera. Not just the abuse, though you will repeat every damn detail. You're going to talk about the money. The accounts you moved. The fake insurance claim. The welfare fraud under my son's name. The cash you took out of my account when I was deployed. The vacation you two took on money stolen from a dependent's benefits card. Herman swallowed hard, eyes darting like a cornered animal. I turned to Marissa. You're going to back it all up. Names, dates, transactions. You're going to explain how long you knew. How much you helped. How you covered it up. And you're going to do it with your voice, and then again with your hand. I opened the notebook. Blank pages. Fresh pen. Laid it down in front of them like a verdict already written. No edits. No lawyer talk. Just the truth, exactly how you lived it. Every last vile second. Herman finally found his voice. Jake, please, you don't understand. I leaned forward, just enough to cut him off with the space between us. I understand exactly, I said. What you don't understand is what comes next if you refuse. I let that hang in the air. Not a scream. Not a threat. Just the weight of certainty. He shifted in his seat. Marissa didn't even look up. I reached for the phone, flipped the screen to record, and pointed the lens toward Herman first. No stuttering. No games. He nodded, eyes glassy. When he started speaking, his voice trembled like it belonged to someone else. He confessed again. And again. The fraud. The abuse. The theft. The manipulation. Everything down to account numbers and which camera he used. When I turned the camera to Marissa, she didn't flinch. Her voice cracked, but she talked. Pages filled with ink as they both wrote, hand after shaking hand. When it was done, I stood in the middle of the room, staring down at the two people who used to call themselves my family. You two will now do everything I say, I said. Exactly. Without hesitation. Without attitude. Without lies. They didn't speak. They just looked at me like they finally understood who had the power now. Because if you don't, I said, it's jail. I paused, just long enough for them to think maybe that was the worst part. Or something worse. I handed Herman a manila envelope and told him to open it. Inside was a one-way bus ticket to Miami, a prepaid hotel reservation, and a burner phone with one contact number already programmed in mine. He sat there looking at it like it was a death sentence in a paper sleeve. You'll check in under the name I gave you. You'll stay there. You'll speak to no one unless I tell you. You'll go out only when I say. You'll keep that phone on, charged, and within reach at all times. If I call, you answer. If you don't, you'll be answering to the police instead. And if you even think about doing anything else, contacting anyone, running, deleting evidence, I promise you, Herman, I will make sure prison feels like the good option. He tried to speak, something weak and gravelly that started with Jake, but I didn't let the sound finish. I just looked at him, and he shut his mouth like it hurt to keep it open. Go pack your things, I said, and pointed to the door. You have 1 hour. He didn't ask what would happen after. He didn't look at Marissa. He just stood and left like he was walking out of a burning building, knowing it wasn't going to be there when he came back. Marissa hadn't moved. She was still in the same spot, eyes fixed on the floor, hands in her lap like a child waiting for sentencing. I turned to her next. You'll pack for Wesley. 2 bags. Clothes, essentials, no games, no toys from this house. I want nothing from this place touching him again. Then you'll pack your own. You're going to Charlotte. You'll stay with your sister, and you'll tell her that you and I are separating. You will not give her details. You will not play the victim. You will say nothing that isn't neutral, simple, and quiet. She looked up finally, eyes swollen, lips trembling. Please, she whispered. Jake. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. Please just let me explain. Let me talk to him. Let me hold him. I stepped closer, and my voice didn't rise. It dropped. Lower than a whisper. Sharper than a knife. You will never see your son again, without court permission. The words landed like a hammer. Her mouth opened again, but nothing came out this time. Her breath caught in her throat. She curled forward and covered her face, but I didn't care if she cried. Not now. Not anymore. You gave him away the second you laughed while he cried, I said, still quiet. You chose a side, and it wasn't his. She nodded slowly, shoulders shaking, hands pressed into her face like they could rewind time if she just held on tight enough. I didn't wait for a reply. I just walked out of the room. She'd do what I said. They both would. And they'd do it without a single scream, bruise, or threat. Because there are some wars you win without ever picking up a weapon. I didn't sleep. Didn't even sit down. After sending them both where they belonged, her to exile, him to hiding, I reached out to the only 3 people I still trusted in this life. One was a former Army scout who owed me for a favor I never once called in until now. The second was a local cop with clean hands, the kind who still believed in the badge but had seen enough to know how dirty everything could get. And the third was a private investigator who specialized in corporate leaks and infidelity, the kind of man who didn't blink at names, only facts. They didn't ask why. I didn't offer details. I gave them names, dates, phone numbers, addresses, and a very specific window, 12 hours. Nothing more. I wanted everything. Digital trails, bank records, burner phones, motel receipts, chat logs, and things that weren't in writing but mattered just as much, testimonies, patterns, photographs, glances in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they delivered. I met the scout in a gas station parking lot just outside town. He handed me a file so thick it needed to be rubber banded shut. No small talk, no smugness, just a nod. Inside, surveillance photos, call logs, debt ledgers, screenshots of encrypted messages Herman thought no one could read. Turns out he owed 43 grand to a mid-level criminal authority in North Florida. A man known for cutting off fingers one week and asking for interest the next. Herman had borrowed small at first, then stupid, bet on fights, skimmed money from a rehab operation he worked security for, used Wesley's name as a burner alias on one transaction. That one made my hands tighten. I thanked the scout. He left without saying a word. An hour later, the officer pulled into a diner booth across from me and slid me a tablet. You're not gonna like this, he said. He was right. 3 names. 3 lovers. One of them had been staying in my house while I was on base. Another had used my razor. I knew it was mine because it still had the dull scratch line from when it fell during my second deployment. The third was her boss. The one she'd always said was too old, too fat, too pathetic. Turns out pathetic men still knew how to sign paychecks. Until she started siphoning from the accounts. Over $17,000 missing. All of it traced. Some moved into a fake savings account under a child's name, Wesley's again. Some rerouted through Venmo, labeled as school fees or groceries. None of it was subtle, but no one had looked until now. The PI was last. He delivered his findings like a lawyer prepping a murder case. Phone pings. Backups of deleted messages. An entire iCloud restore from her old work phone that included voice notes, calendar entries, and a photo album she never meant to keep. Screenshots of passwords, ledger snapshots, voicemails from someone crying and begging her not to expose them. She never responded. By the time I was alone again, it wasn't even about rage anymore. That had passed. This was something colder, sharper. I laid all the files out in front of me like evidence in a sealed courtroom and started connecting lines. The kind of destruction I had in mind didn't require fists or threats. It didn't need fire or blood or bruises. It only needed the truth. The raw kind. The kind no one could hide from. Not a judge. Not a debt collector. Not a child. Not a single soul who had ever looked either of them in the eye and believed a word they said. I didn't need to touch them. I just had to pull the mask off, slowly, carefully, and show the world what had been smiling behind it all along. I walked into that courtroom with everything. Not a theory. Not a plea. Not a cry for sympathy. Just the truth. Cold, documented, time-stamped, and unignorable. I wore my uniform. Not because I thought it would sway the judge, but because it was the only version of myself I still trusted to walk into fire and come out holding the truth in both hands. The judge barely looked at me at first. He was older, the kind with years carved into his eyes and not enough patience left for anything but facts. That was fine. I had plenty. First came the videos. The ones Herman thought would stay buried in hard drives and cloud accounts. I submitted them through my attorney, but I made sure to be the one who hit play. The courtroom went silent. You could hear the sound of the air conditioner clicking on behind the gallery, but you couldn't hear breathing. The audio was enough. My son's voice. The belt. The laughter. My name twisted into a punchline. People shifted in their seats like they were trying not to vomit. Then came the medical records. Pediatric visits Marissa canceled. Notes from a school counselor who'd flagged emotional withdrawal and signs of distress, but was told the child's father was distant, unavailable, and unaware. Follow-up appointments she never brought him to. The judge's mouth tightened, but he still didn't speak. Next were the neighbor statements. One from the elderly woman across the street who said she heard the boy screaming during the daytime when his mother was home, but never saw him playing outside. One from the kid 2 doors down who said Wesley always looked scared when his uncle's car pulled up. My attorney read those out loud. Slowly, clearly. No embellishment. No theatrics. Then I dropped the hammer. Financial documents. Fraudulent accounts in Wesley's name. Trace payments. The siphoning from our joint account while I was overseas. The signature Marissa forged on a benefits check. The signed confessions. For pages. Each line initialed. Dated. Full acknowledgement of abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. I looked at the judge and said, I didn't hit them. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I gathered proof. And I protected my son when nobody else did. That was when the silence broke. He leaned forward, elbows on the bench, hands steepled in front of his mouth like he was holding something back. Then he cleared his throat and asked only one question. Is the child present today? I nodded. Wesley was in the next room, with a child advocate and the same officer who'd been with me the morning I filed the initial motion. The judge asked for a recess. When he returned, he didn't hesitate. Full custody awarded to the petitioner. Immediate and permanent until further review. Supervised visitation only, with child psychologist approval. No unsupervised contact. Travel restrictions on the mother. Child's location sealed from all non-essential parties. Marissa didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just folded in on herself like someone had finally turned off the switch that powered her voice. But it wasn't over. The judge turned to my attorney, asked about the secondary packet we had filed under seal. The one marked federal concern. That's when the dominoes started falling on Herman. Bank fraud. Wire transfers across state lines. Use of a minor's identity in financial crimes. And the digital trail connecting him to criminal groups through multiple burner numbers. The feds came for him the same day. Problem was, they weren't the only ones. Word got out. The wrong people started asking questions. Names got mentioned that should have stayed in the dark. And now Herman wasn't just a suspect. He was a target. The debt collectors he'd burned didn't care about due process or subpoenas. They wanted blood. And they didn't care whose. The feds moved him fast. Relocated him under protection. But you could see it on his face when they hauled him out of the courtroom in cuffs. He knew what was coming. Not prison. Not trial. Something worse. Truth. That's all I ever used. No fists. No revenge. No threats I didn't follow through on. Just fact. Delivered precisely, methodically, and without apology. By the time I walked out of that courthouse, I had my son. They had nothing. And the only thing I'd burned down was the lie they'd been living in. It's quiet now. Not the kind of silence you find in war zones or interrogation rooms. The heavy, waiting kind, but the soft one. The earned one. The kind that comes with wind moving through trees and a kid's laughter echoing across an open yard. Wesley's on the swing again, barefoot, hair messy, arms stretched wide like he's trying to touch the sky. The same swing I built from pressure-treated wood and a rope strong enough to hold both of us if it had to. 3 months ago, that boy couldn't look me in the eye without flinching. Couldn't sleep unless every door in the house was locked, his nightlight on, and his stuffed dinosaur within arm's reach. Now he forgets to be afraid. That's how I know we're winning. I'm on the porch with my coffee going cold in my hand, boots off, elbows resting on my knees, just watching. No noise. No phone. No threats looming just beyond the fence line. Just him. And me. And peace that didn't come from a treaty. It came from fire and ruin and rebuilding everything from the foundation up. They called me just a mechanic. A guy who washed army tires. The weak one. The absent one. The joke. But the thing about underestimating someone is that by the time you realize you made a mistake, they're already behind you. Already inside the wire. Already dismantling everything you thought was safe. I smile, just barely, as Wesley leaps off the swing midair and lands on both feet like a superhero. He raises his fists in triumph and shouts, "Did you see that?" I saw. I say back, grinning now. You nailed it. And I mean it. He did. We both did.